Welcome to Aging with Dignity. I'm your host, Versha. Today's conversation sits right at the intersection of family, finances, and something deeply personal for many of us, the question of how and where we age safely. For most families, this decision doesn't come with a clear plan. It comes after a fall, a hospital discharge, or the sudden realization that home is no longer set up for safe living. And at that point, the choices often feel rushed, expensive, and emotionally heavy. In this episode, I'm joined by Erica Sell, founder and CEO of Harmony Home Medical Supply and a specialist in home modifications and adaptive planning for aging in place. We're going to unpack a question many families are quietly facing. Is it more cost effective and dignified to invest in home modifications or transition to assisted living? But beyond the numbers, this conversation is really about safety, independence, and how we plan before crisis makes a decision for us. Let's begin. Welcome, Erica, and thank you for joining us today. Um, to start with, can you share a little bit about your journey and what led you into the home modification and aging in place work area?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on, Varsha. I'm really happy to be here. My journey started a long time ago, but it kind of the store and the current business became inspired in around 2007. So I grew up working in a medical equipment family. I grew up working my mom's store, which was a traditional insurance facing company. And I wanted nothing to do with wheelchairs after that point. Went to college, got into finance, graduated college, had my first job at Trilogy Financial. My mom had an embezzlement in her company. And she called and said, I really need your help. I need you to come back and help me save the family business. And so I left and I went back up there. And now, as an adult, I was following her everywhere. Plus, she had to lay off everybody. She only had about 4 people out of 12 left. And so I was doing home assessments and measuring people and all of these amazingly interesting things that I never saw when I was in high school. I cleaned wheelchairs and delivered them to Timbuktu. So this time around, I was seeing all of this amazing work that they're doing that's pretty customized, specialized, outfitting people's homes. And I said, why don't you show this in the store? And why don't you do, retail and educate seniors on what's available? Because we weren't doing this for seniors. We were doing this for the regional center for developmentally disabled kids. And we had majority senior clients getting Medicare products, but just the basics, nothing outside of Medicare coverage. And she said, oh, because it's not covered by Medicare, nobody will pay for it. Nobody will want this stuff because insurance doesn't cover it. I said, "No, people need this. I think, like, you're wrong. Let's try it." She's like, "No, it won't work." So that was up in Northern California, a small town. I came down back to San Diego. I went to college and I started at the Del Mar Fair, just a little tiny booth with all the best stuff. And then the rest is history. That was 17 years ago, 18 years ago now. And the store started on a shoestring, really small. And now in our third iteration, we have two 4,500 square foot showrooms full of the latest and greatest in medical supply and home modifications. And we educate people and we show them what's possible and we let them decide. It doesn't matter what third party payers decide. You can use those resources too, but make that destiny your own. So that's what we do now.
It's not surprising that you've had the success that you've had. First of all, the grit to keep going after it. But we're an aging population. And I think more and more people, as we've discussed in the past, want to stay home in their homes. It's not always the natural choice, given the way some of the homes were structured. They were structured for growing families, not aging families or aging couples. And so I'm not surprised that you've had such success. I think also when you and I have talked in the past, we've talked a lot more about even the advice that you're able to give to families as they consider this. So one of my questions too is that people really only consider the home modifications when they're in a crisis or have just come through a crisis mode and kind of have to look at things and go, okay, this is not going to work the way it is. What do we need to do? Um, First of all, can we just talk about in your opinion, why do you think there's not much proactive planning? Why do we often wait until that crisis? And I'm assuming the answer is we should be more proactive about it. Can you share any guidance on how we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for most of us, it's difficult to see ourselves in the future. It's probably the same reason why people don't save enough and financially plan enough too. But we definitely don't visualize ourselves as having mobility impairment, using potentially a wheelchair when we're able-bodied. We just don't think forward enough like that unless we're in the space, unless we're in healthcare, or we've experienced it through a loved one. That can change our frame. And now, since we have so many people aging and coming into retirement, and centennials and all these things changing and aging, the trend for us is getting more and more preparation in there. So we're probably like 40% preparation, 60% crisis clients, where we used to be 80% crisis, 20% in the very beginning. It's migrating to having some more awareness around it, but I would say looking at your own life and your own home at the time that you see your parents go through aging. So for me, that's now. For me, that's now. I've made changes in my house. I have products in my house, and when I remodel my home, I remodel it for accessibility. And we tend to do that every 7 to 10 years. And it's not expensive to do it for accessibility when you're doing it anyways. So a much longer view could be helpful.
Absolutely. I think you're right. And as we watch our parents age, and we're all living so much longer than we ever did before, so many of these issues are fairly new to us as a society. And so as we watch our parents age, I think you're right that we try, if we're smart, and we try and reflect on our own lives. We try and incorporate that. And I've had so many people come back to me on not only the topic of home modifications, but getting their wills just kind of refreshed, or doing it if they've never done it because they're working on their parents' wills, or they're finding out how they've had to struggle with their parents not having a will. So I think we are much more reflective on our own aging. So I love that you brought that up. Do you think families wait too long?
In most cases, yes. Like I said, some are doing that preparation. I'm seeing it more, and with guidance of like a private duty care manager, or even setting up fiduciary way in advance, because there's a lot of there's a lot of spokes on this wheel of aging. Um, so yeah, I see people doing it sooner and sooner, but they do need to take that time and look at not only what their house needs, but I think it kinda starts with the question, or what are my aging goals? And, living in your home forever doesn't necessarily have to be the answer, but if that's what you want, then there's steps to take. Or if you visit, and then I think it's a great idea to visit a few active, senior communities and assisted livings, and CCNRs, which are the continuing ones where you can start in an active setting, go to assisted, go to skilled nursing. It's a really good idea to visit those places and understand what they are, and then make goals, just like we do in our businesses and in other aspects of our life. Do that for our aging and for our end of life stages too.
So it's interesting because we did that for my parents. We took them to see some residences. We showed them condos to downsize, and then they made the choice that they wanted to stay in their home. And we said, okay, let's look at how we make the home more adapted to your current needs and projected needs as opposed to what they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago. One of the things that keeps coming up is the cost of these care residences. In Canada, it'll run $10,000 to $15,000 a month. Do you have any so when people look at home modifications, do you have any estimates on what people are spending to get their homes equipped and ready for their future if they were to stay in their homes?
I think that if people invested about 2 or 3 months of what it would be in assisted living, that they can make their spaces accessible forever. Now, that's an average because every home is different.
Mm.
Um, the second story situations, if they have powered equipment, they might need to do a VPL or elevator as opposed to just a stair lift. So each home is different. But if you were to invest in some of these things early on, so you don't have a fall, so you need less crisis equipment in the future, I think on average 2 to 3 minutes. So now $20,000 to $30,000 of equipment and modifications could make somebody's home um, functional, accessible forever. Now we can do it for a lot less if the space is easy, Some people only need a couple threshold ramps, grab bars, better lighting, and a lift chair and a bed. It could be much less, but then other people need to do a full roll-in shower, and they may want to continue their upstairs living, so putting in a stair lift with that and making sure their bed and shower space are both functional upstairs. So it's very varied. But compared to moving to a community, if your home is paid off, or soon to be, or the mortgage is much lower than that 10 to 15,000, then investing a little bit in it can be a much more financially viable solution.
Yeah, and Erica, I love the way you kind of set 2 categories because not everybody needs the chairlift to go up the stairs or the modified roll-in showers. Many of the conversations I get involved in are, "Oh, but we'll do that later. We don't need that right now. We don't need that right now." But maybe some of those things like the grab bars and, the railings on beds or changing your bed for a more accessible one. I love that you raise that because those are things we can do more immediately. That spreads the cost over time, of course. But I guess there's always this emotional context to everything that's changing, right? And I guess it's also coming to the realization that we're aging. Not many people don't want to deal with that. If we talk about that emotional attachment that people have to their homes, do you see how families balance that with the need for the changes in care and safety, more importantly?
Well, I think it's why they tend to wanna age in place too. Home is home. Um, and we don't see as much resistance to modifying the home as leaving the home. It's more the financial aspect about modifying the home. And sometimes spouse depends. There's some dynamics sometimes with spouses, like one spouse may not want the house to look quote unquote medical. So there's an inhibition about changing it up too much, but they also are uneducated about what accessibility can look like because it doesn't need to look medical in most instances. Um, so yes, there's that attachment to kind of stay there. There's an incentive to stay there. But then when they are looking at the cost to do so, then they kind of revert to short-term thinking because there's a much higher cost to having that fall and having to go to a community, having to do the financial and a physical bill of breaking your hip, of having an incident that sets you back in a major way. And then sometimes back to that game plan and that pre-planning, like they'll do something to help them manage right now, like put in a stair lift. And I see this often with companies that don't do the full picture. They won't educate a client on what could be a future. So they'll happily put in that stair lift or they'll happily put in the low threshold shower, but not roll in shower and not talk about, well, in 5 years, there's a good chance, before we pass, 80% of us use a wheelchair. So there's a good chance that that threshold might render your bathroom useless. So, do the work now. And then with the stair lift, I've seen people put in a stair lift only to consider after they had a decline in mobility or a stroke or something that their upstairs bathroom doesn't work for them. And they have a $30,000 project on their hands now, or they need to go figure out downstairs. And they didn't ever ask that question when they put in the stair lift. And if it's a curved stair lift, you could be looking at $20,000. So the emotional attachment at home helps them wanna do that, but then the financial resistance makes them pump the brakes, and sometimes they're not looking at the full spectrum of what could happen in their home and making the plan, again, the plan ahead of time of what does it look like using a chair in my house? And just planning for that because that would allow you to use your house forever.
Absolutely. It's I'm just thinking back to my parents, of course, and how we dealt with it in crisis. But the shower that you talk about, we took the tub out. We were putting a walk-in shower, and then quickly realized that no, we might need to, exactly like you said, might need to do it with a wheelchair. What we didn't think about was the door frame. So we eventually, when we got the wheelchair, it was short by about an inch. It just wouldn't pass through. So we had to take the door off. We had to do the 180 door. So these things, our homes are not built for that. So are there any common design issues that you come across and you say, hey, these are things you should start to look at now and not wait until that crisis point?
Yeah, and some of them are really easy, like doors. Like you said, doors, door widening can be a task, but there's those offset door hinges that can take the door out of the frame completely and give you that inch and a half back, and that's sometimes all you need. But so the most important entry and exit points of your home, and then of course your bathroom and bedroom door, the lighting in all of those places. So, you know, mood lighting isn't what we need as we age. It's nice to have some different type of ambient lighting that could be on a dimmer or different styles of lighting. Maybe the bright can lights and then the lower dimmable wall lights.
So, Erica, there are some common design issues you're probably coming against when you're working with families. Can you describe what we can start to look for before we end up in that crisis mode?
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is that a lot of them are really simple too. So things like doorways and lighting can be a big barrier, but easily changed with things like offset hinges. Those are a hinge that exists that takes the door out of the frame, so you gain that extra inch and a half. Um, and then, door widening is also manageable. It can cost around 1,000 to 1,500, but looking at your entry doors, your bathroom doors, and your bedroom doors, and then the lighting in those areas, just doing bulbs that have that higher Kelvin, just changing them out is an easy way to upgrade that because when we're 80, our eyes take twice as much light to see the same things as when we were 40. So that's a big difference and a big deal, and it can prevent tripping on something that we didn't see because we had low light and couldn't see something in our peripheral vision, and keep us out of the hospital. So those are simple ones. And then checking for a bedroom, bathroom, first floor situation or scenario that you could do if you needed to, both temporary interim if you had a fall or a little setback and you needed recovery, or if that were to be the plan long term. Would you remodel a downstairs bathroom, or would you prefer to create a upstairs access through a lift? So those are some big key ones. The ones that are easy that I see all the time not being done is the lighting and the trip hazards, like the throw rugs, the cabling. Those are all so easy and they're so accomplishable now that people should go out and do that tomorrow and switch their homes
100%.
that way.
100%. And I think they're, like you said, they're very easy and they help prevent some of those issues, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
those
Yeah, then
throw
you may
rugs
not
are,
need that.
yeah,
Yep.
throw rugs and lighting, a good one. Um, do you ever see, I mean, a lot of the homes tend to be multi-story homes. If it's it could be detached or semi-detached, but if it's a home as opposed to an apartment or condo, um, do you see are there trends with the way homes are being reconfigured for people to stay in place? Like, do people just shut down a level of the house as they age, or do they are there other things that you're finding that people do? Are they putting elevators in? I mean, how do we continue to use the real estate that we've got?
Yeah. All sorts of different ways. In San Diego, a lot of ADUs are being built. They changed the legislation to get expedited permitting and lower the cost to do it. So that's been a big one here. Also, with new builds, it's very common to do the downstairs master and ensuite bathroom, even in a two-story home. So new builds are kind of getting this right and wider doorways on everything. But for people in their home, we are seeing more and more VPL and elevator use because the cost of those has actually come down in a way. I mean, the VPL hasn't come down, but the knowledge and the application of it as an elevator has increased. So that's like an industrial type of platform lift that goes up and down and can do two stories. But it's a third of the cost of putting in a bona fide elevator. And then there's a new product called a stilts lift, and it's actually really pretty, where a vertical platform lift for VPL is not pretty. And that one is same, also a third the cost of an elevator, of something like a McKinley or traditional elevator. So we're seeing those get used more and more to actually continue using the bedrooms they've always used in bathrooms. And then we're seeing a lot of families do the low threshold, everything first floor, and move their parents in. Having people co-live and changing the adult child space to work for them. And because they sold mom or dad's house, like they're putting in the money to make downstairs work for them, or guest bedroom, whatever it may be, and co-living and doing it that way. And it also saves to not have to have home care costs down the road if a family member can help out with that.
Yeah, it's not always possible, especially as we children grow up and move to different parts of the world. It's not always feasible that you ask parents to move in with you because also when you think about the parents and their social network, you're asking them to leave that behind and move to wherever you are. Sometimes that works out, which is wonderful. I like the description of the VPL and what was the other one called? The
A
prettier
stilt
version,
slip.
the stealth list.
Stilts, yeah.
Because I think that allows people to consider using the whole home. It's
Mhm.
just a movement from one level to the other. And if they can incorporate that and start to think about that earlier, I think it gives people an ability to continue to use their home. We were very fortunate for my parents. They had a front split home. So once they came up those 7 or 8 steps, everything was on one level: living room, dining room, kitchen, bedrooms, bathrooms. And still we had to make modifications, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
but
Always.
but we
But
they I
yes,
think my
short
parents
story.
stopped using yeah, they stopped using the basement except for the laundry. My dad would come down for the laundry and that was it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the tri-levels and you guys have basements there. We don't here, but we have a lot of two-story building condos and tri-levels. Tri-levels are a nightmare. Sometimes a floor of the home does get ruled out there, or we look for a spot where we can safely exit at each level of the home with one continuous lift. Like, is there a part of the house that
mm,
can do that? Because that can be difficult to configure, where you're not
yeah,
coming into uh, the kitchen island or have to line it up correctly through the all three floors.
absolutely. So there's so many different kinds of homes and so many different ways people need to use it as they age and different issues that they encounter. Some of them are common as you've shared. Um, do you ever come in and do an assessment of homes? And if you do, what does that professional assessment look like? What do you cover when you come from A to Z?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we do home assessments, and it kind of starts with doing an intake of the person. And this is where like there'll be a lot of distinction between working with a company that's in medical and accessibility space versus just a contractor. And if you didn't have a company like that in your area, you could work with an OT. Occupational therapists are great and combine or his skill set with the contractor skill set. For us, we've done that so often. So I do that on my own now, and it kind of starts with the person, simple height, weight, but then it's functional mobility level now. Any diagnosis to consider, and if so, prognosis that go along with those diagnoses. So we can make a game plan that works for that client now and forever. They have that information to put everything we recommend in context for them. However, I go through most homes with the glasses of a wheelchair on, and I lay people's homes out um, for the ability to use a wheelchair if they ever need to. And then if someone is not even close to that stage, we can give the important now, but to be expected later, or this can work now. Um, and yeah, and you can consider this later when it comes. And we combine equipment with modification. So for that wheelchair example, we could make their home completely functional for wheelchair accessibility, except maybe they don't want to do the bathroom remodel. They don't want to do the expense of pulling out a tub or walk-in shower. So we can educate and give them a quote so they know about something called a shower buddy, which is like a track system that goes over the tub and slides you into the tub as if you had a roll-in shower. And we use all of those tools together with construction, given a person's budget and an outcome they're seeking in that moment. So we may have someone who wants a fully wheelchair accessible home right now, but they could have budget constraints. So we look at the optimal, the best practice, 5-foot turning radiuses, the wide doorways, a roll and shower, everything we want. And then if we can't afford or get to everything we want right now, then how can we accomplish that with some of the medical equipment tools that we have? And by combining the two, we can often get an outcome that works for somebody's safety and reduce the total cost of just going full blown construction with everything.
Erica, it's you take a very practical approach because most seniors are living on a budget, and they're suddenly faced because they haven't thought about this in their younger years to plan it like maybe some of their adult children are. So the budgets are very important, and I love that you're able to actually say, okay, this is what you should do now, and this is what you need to look forward to, so they can budget and plan. How far out do you go? Like in some of the projections, do you try and go as far out as possible, or do you just say, okay, this is like a 5 year plan?
Oh, we lifetime. So,
Like,
like I said, I'll give them feedback in their context of right now, but I do always plan for the wheelchair use, and it's just because the statistics are that 80% of us use a chair, and if we set our home up for wheelchair use, it just makes it easier to use for everyone. It's more universal design than just specifically accessible design. It just makes it easier to use whether you're a toddler, a pregnant mom, or a senior. Just making the reaching, the stepping over, the squeezing through, all of that not necessary.
what about kitchens? Kitchens are interesting because they seem to be the hub of the home. But as we
Yeah.
age, we're not able to reach as far up. Step ladders become very dangerous. Some of the equipment that we've got in the kitchen is no longer as friendly. Any advice on kitchen renos
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
modification?
And kitchens are the least they're always the last one in a very aging situation because there's so many great like on-demand food options and food alternatives. Um and they're trying to focus on just the necessary. But when we do, it's appliances and devices like front knob stoves. We want to not be reaching over the flame. The sensitivity of the skin as we age too is diminish, like, we can't feel as much as in, when we were younger, and so we could more easily burn yourselves. Um, that applies too for the thermostatic, valves for your sinks and your showers, and setting those to not ever let the water scald because sometimes you just don't feel it as it's increasing. Um and then so again, the lighting and then task height thing. So task lighting under cabinet lighting is really common in new construction now, and it's really easy to add in older homes. So you can have your above ambient lighting, but then add the switches, and you can do it with a remote control. You can do it with a switch to get that really bright light where you're going to work and cut and do things. And then add a seated task height. So that could be like if you had a kitchen island and you didn't want to do a full gut and make it roll under, you could add like a flip up table at the end where it kind of hinges off the edge of your counter or your island, and that's a seated task height area. So there's a variety of different ways to do it, but you want to consider the lighting, the safety, the need to sit and do some of your kitchen work. And then of course the reaching. We want everything at, waist to shoulder height, all our highly used stuff. So that first drawer, that lower shelf on the cabinet. And then there's a lot of modifications to cabinetry you can do, both pull down, pull out, lazy Susans. We want to avoid squatting down low and reaching back in the cabinet or tippy toe or step stool up into the tops.
Amazing. So you've already covered a lot of really interesting home safety and mobility equipment just in as we've been talking. Are there any nice to have little gadgets that you come across that actually really help with safety?
Nice to have gadgets. Well, my is on the equipment side, like my favorite product because as soon as they came out with the Twilight feature on a lift chair, I bought two for my house is lift chairs. Lift chairs are a luxury medical device, but they are so needed and functional, in later years, but they've made them so aesthetically pleasing and comfortable that they're wonderful for all of us now. And then the same price or less than like the really expensive Lazy Boys and the name brand leather recliners, but they tilt you back, they heat and vibrate, they have alternating um bottom massager things now. So it's addressing pressure prevention, but it also is just is awesome. So that's a luxury gadget. Some of the home accessibility related ones that are easy are photosensitive lighting outside, so you never need to turn your lights on when the sun goes down, that exterior lights pop on. So whenever you're coming home, your front door, you can see your keys, see your steps. Motion sensor lighting on your way to the bathroom, or even doing it as blue light. I have a blue light in one in my bathroom. So if I use it at night, it doesn't wake me up, but I can kind of see. Um, so things like that, and making it automatic, because especially for our clients that may have a little bit of memory loss, or doing new habits is not the easiest. So if you set it where it's motion detected, it automatically comes on, or it's ready there, like grab bars. I also have grab bars in all my bathrooms. They're so pretty now. They're dual function grab bars. It's like a soap dish that looks like a grab bar, a towel rack that looks like a grab, or a towel rack that is a grab bar, functions as both. It just integrates, with your design. We have toilet paper holders that are grab bars. So I've put those in my bathroom spaces because, one, they'll never fall out when my kids are pulling on them and doing chin ups and whatever, and two, they're super sturdy. If we have a slip or grab it, it's not going to come out of the wall like a toilet paper holder or a towel bar would. So
So
little things, but they work.
absolutely. And what I love about those little things is you can do them as early as you want because they're not going to feel like I'm equipping my home for a medical event. So I
Yeah.
love that. Erica, you've been so forthcoming with so much information. I'm sure our listeners and watchers are are scribbling notes as they watch this episode. Any final comments that you would like to share about the journey that people are facing now as they age?
Um, I would say to consider the different experts in the field of aging that may be helpful. Working with a professional like Harmony Home Medical or your local medical supply, to get advice on what to buy right the first time. I have a lot of
Mhm.
clients buy the wrong product, have 4 walkers, or ask us to buy power chairs that are from China that don't fit them or work. That's on the medical front, but then looking at the whole picture, because it does take a village. So considering some short-term advising from a financial planner, the real estate people, a private duty care manager could be priceless when you have a crisis. And here in San Diego, you can onboard with them. They're usually nurses and case managers who worked in hospitals and clinical settings before and now have their own businesses.
Mhm.
But you can onboard with them so they have all your critical information. And then if you had a fall, or your mom or dad went to the hospital and you're not in town, or you live in separate cities, you could activate them now. And they work as like the adult daughter. They're advocating for them at the hospital or with the medical people, because hospitals, especially hospitals in America now, I can't tell you how many mistakes and over medication and lack of advocacy. And for someone who is in a medically declined state, or they're just focusing on their health, it's too much to deal with out here. You need an advocate, you need a person, and so they can be so helpful if your family isn't immediate. So I would say making, your care team or your task force that educates you and gets you knowledgeable about what you may need or do need to successfully age and be prepared if you were to have any sort of medical incident.
That's great advice, Erica. And here too, we have I can't quote the number of errors that happen, but I do know you need to advocate. You have to have someone advocate for you if you're an older person because things just don't get done. And I had a medical journal for each of my parents because of potential errors that could happen with the changing from one medical practitioner to another, one specialist to another. And they would try something. Wait a minute, that medication didn't work on them, or they had a reaction, or we changed it
Yeah,
off to this. So
it's
so definitely,
priceless.
definitely. Yeah,
And I think that the hospitals will pay more attention and do a better job with those people they know have people watching too, or they're caring for them. So if it's not family, there's professionals that do that too. So
great
it's
advice.
important to have your team.
Erica, thank you so much for your time, all of your insights, and once again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Barsha. My pleasure's all mine. It's great.
What stands out most from this conversation is how families delay these decisions until they're forced to make them quickly. Erica helped us see that aging in place is not just an emotional preference. It can be a practical, structured, and financially strategic choice when planned early and done properly. But it also requires honesty about safety risks, about changing needs, and about what kind of support is realistic at home. If there's one takeaway, it's this: planning ahead changes everything. It protects dignity, preserves choice, and often reduces both the emotional and financial stress for families. If this episode made you think differently about your home or a loved one situation, don't wait for a crisis point to start the conversation. And as always, if this episode sparked something for you, please share it with your family, your friends, or anyone you care about. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to this podcast if you're enjoying what you hear. There will be a care toolkit for this episode, so don't forget to download that when you get a chance. Thank you for listening in and sharing your time with me. And please join me each week for new insights into aging with dignity. Until next time, reminding us all to age gracefully and live vibrantly.
Everything you've heard today, just real talk. It's just our personal stories, experiences, and honest opinions. This podcast isn't providing legal, medical, financial, or therapeutic advice. And no, listening doesn't make me or my guests your lawyer, doctor, financial advisor, or therapist. The guests and I are here to share stories, spark ideas, and hopefully give you something to think about. When it comes to the big decisions, make sure you do your homework or check in with the experts who know your situation best. We're here to keep the conversation going. You're the one in the driver's seat.